Look around the room you're in right now. You've got a medicine cabinet down the hall stocked with triple antibiotic ointment, sterile adhesive bandages, and perhaps a prescription bottle of penicillin. If you get a deep cut or scrape a knuckle while working in the yard, you wash it out under tap water, slap some cream on it, and forget about it. But 30,000 years ago, a minor scratch from a sharp thorn or a tiny nick while skinning an animal carcass wasn't an inconvenience. It was a horrific death sentence. Your ancient ancestors lived in a world teeming with invisible, microscopic killers, long before anyone knew what a germ even was. Sepsis, gangrene, and rampant bacterial infections were waiting to turn a stubbed toe into an agonizing, multi-day exit from this world. Yet, without microscopes, without sterile operating rooms, and without a single pharmaceutical factory, our ancestors didn't just drop dead from every scratch. They fought back. They engineered medical defenses so sophisticated, practiced surgical techniques so precise, and synthesized natural antibiotics so complex that modern scientists initially refused to believe they were achieved with primitive tools. They were executing chemical warfare against bacteria tens of thousands of years before the discovery of penicillin. By the end of this, the simple tube of Neosporin in your bathroom is going to feel like an absolute miracle. The myth of the dirty caveman. First, let's kill the most persistent myth about ancient human health and medicine. Think about Paleolithic medicine, and your brain probably goes straight to a Hollywood trope. A dirty, grunting caveman rubbing random mud and prehistoric leaves onto a festering wound, shouting at the sky, and hopping for the best while the patient inevitably dies. Here, what kills me, that image is completely dead wrong. Ancient humans weren't helpless victims of the microbial world, nor were they blindly guessing. The idea that prehistoric people just rolled over and died from every bacterial invasion is thoroughly debunked by physical evidence. If they were that incompetent, you wouldn't be here reading this today. The archaeological record is packed with jaw-dropping proof of survival. We have found ancient skeletons, dating back over 30,000 years, showing completely healed amputations, perfectly reset compound fractures, and skull surgeries where the bone actively regrew, proving the patient lived for years afterward. You don't survive a severed limb in the Stone Age by accident. You survive it because your community knows exactly how to keep microscopic killers from eating you alive from the inside out. They didn't have a theory of germs, but they had something just as powerful: thousands of years of intense behavioral psychology, razor-sharp observation, and trial-and-error chemistry. Let me show you the 5 craziest, most brilliant methods ancient humans used to defeat deadly infections. 1. The accidental antibiotic industrial complex. Here's the first one, and it starts with a discovery that completely blew the minds of modern microbiologists. For decades, we believed Alexander Fleming invented antibiotics in 1928, but our ancestors were mass-producing them thousands of years ago through their diet. When archaeologists excavated Sudanese Nubian skeletons dating back to roughly 350 to 550 AD, they performed an analysis on the bone tissue using ultraviolet light. To their absolute astonishment, the bones were glowing a distinct yellow-green color. That specific fluorescence is the unmistakable signature of tetracycline, a powerful, broad-spectrum modern antibiotic. These ancient people weren't just exposed to it by accident. Their bones were saturated with it. How? It all came down to their beer. The Nubians fermented grain in large clay vessels, creating a thick, porridge-like brew. The specific conditions of their grain storage consistently attracted a soil bacterium called streptomyces, which produces tetracycline as a defense mechanism against other bacteria. The Nubians noticed that drinking this specific, foamy gruel kept them from getting sick and cured festering ailments. Picture this. Without ever seeing a microbe, they systematically controlled the temperature and moisture of their fermentation processes to brew a highly concentrated, liquid antibiotic. They were essentially running an informal pharmaceutical lab out of clay pots, curing severe respiratory and bone infections over a millennium before modern science caught up. 2. The living surgical sutures, the insect clamp. Imagine you're running through the brush, hunting a stag, and a jagged branch rips open a deep, 5-inch gash across your thigh. In the ancient world, an open wound like that is an open highway for lethal pathogens. You need to close the skin immediately, but you don't have sterile nylon thread or a curved steel needle. So our ancestors weaponized the local wildlife, specifically leafcutter and driver ants. This technique, practiced across Africa, South America, and parts of Asia for thousands of years, relies on behavioral psychology and insect anatomy. A hunter would hold the edges of the torn human skin tightly together. Then, another member of the tribe would pick up a massive soldier ant using their fingers, holding it just above the wound. The soldier ant's natural defense mechanism is to bite down with immense force using its powerful, sickle-shaped mandibles. The moment the ant bit across the seam of the wound, clamping the two pieces of flesh together, the hunter would snap the ant's body off, leaving only the head behind. The mandibles remained locked in a death grip, acting as a sterile, organic surgical staple. They would repeat this down the line of the cut until the wound was completely sealed. The ant's saliva often contained natural antimicrobial compounds that further prevented bacteria from taking hold, keeping the wound sealed tightly until the human skin could naturally knit back together. 3. The precision stone surgeon's Neolithic trepanation. This next one sounds completely insane. I'm just warning you. Imagine having an infection so severe inside your head, perhaps from a deeply infected tooth or a blunt force trauma from a hunt, that the pressure of the fluid building up inside your skull is causing blinding pain, seizures, and imminent death. Long before scalpels, ancient doctors performed trepanation, drilling or scraping a literal hole directly into a living human skull to relieve pressure and remove infected tissue. At a site in France called Encision, archaeologists found a skull from 5000 BC with two clean, deliberate holes bored into it. But here is the detail that stops scientists cold. There were absolutely no signs of infection around the surgical site, and the bone edges showed advanced healing. The patient survived the operation and lived for years. How did they prevent lethal brain infections during a Stone Age surgery? They used flint. The modern experiment proof. Modern surgical researchers have tested the properties of freshly knapped flint and obsidian blades. They discovered that a stone blade can be flaked down to an edge that is literally molecules thin, far sharper than a standard modern steel scalpel. Because the stone edge is so sharp, it cleanly severs cells rather than tearing them, minimizing tissue damage. Furthermore, obsidian is completely non-porous, meaning bacteria cannot hide inside microscopic cracks in the tool. By passing the stone blade through a flame before cutting, ancient surgeons were operating with a tool that was functionally more sterile and precise than anything used in 19th century European hospitals. 4. The biosurgical cleansing force, maggot therapy. If a wound did become terribly infected and gangrene or tissue death set in, the patient faced an agonizing death as the rot spread through their bloodstream. To save the person, you had to remove every single atom of dead, necrotic flesh without damaging the healthy tissue around it. Doing that with a stone knife is nearly impossible, so ancient healers outsourced the labor to blowfly larvae. Practiced by indigenous cultures globally, from the Maya to the Aboriginal Australians, maggot therapy is a masterclass in biological precision. Healers would intentionally introduce specific fly larvae into a festering wound. It sounds nightmarish, like something straight out of a horror movie, but the biology is flawless. These specific maggots only consume dead, decaying tissue. They completely ignore healthy, living human flesh. As they eat the rot, they secrete an enzyme that liquefies the necrotic tissue, making it easy for them to ingest. But here is the real kicker. As they feed, the larvae excrete chemicals like allantoin and urea, which actively kill harmful bacteria like Staphylococcus aureus and stimulate the growth of healthy new human tissue. They were living, self-guided microsurgeons that cleaned out infections with a level of microscopic accuracy that a human doctor could never achieve by hand. 5. The sphagnum bog pharmacies. When ancient humans migrated across cold, swampy northern landscapes, they didn't have access to tropical medicinal plants, but they discovered an absolute superpower growing right in the peat bogs: sphagnum moss. During the Bronze and Iron Ages, and carried forward by nomadic northern tribes, sphagnum moss was the ultimate combat dressing for wounds. If a warrior took a spear hack to the arm, they would immediately pack the open flesh with clumps of this specific moss. The physics and chemistry of sphagnum moss are incredible. The cell walls of the moss contain highly complex carbohydrates called sphagnum. When a wound bleeds into the moss, the sphagnum binds to nutrients in the blood and lowers the pH of the immediate environment, creating a highly acidic, sterile zone. Bacteria literally cannot reproduce or survive in that environment. They freeze up and die. Additionally, the hollow cells of the moss are incredibly absorbent, drawing fluid, pus, and toxins away from the wound like a high-tech modern vacuum dressing. It kept the wound dry, highly acidic, and completely free of bacterial colonization. The logistics of prehistoric medicine. Here, what we skip over when we think about ancient survival. Surviving an infection wasn't just about knowing which plant to rub on a scratch. It required an immense system of societal organization and passing down complex oral databases over thousands of years. Think about the work involved. To treat an infected wound with a plant-based poultice, someone had to know exactly which plant to harvest, which specific part of the root to grind, what exact season to pick it in, and how to boil it down without destroying the active chemical compounds. It required an early form of the scientific method, tested across generations through extreme trial and error. Furthermore, it required deep empathy and community care. A person undergoing a skull surgery or recovering from a massive infection couldn't hunt, forage, or protect themselves for weeks or months. The tribe had to commit to carrying them, feeding them, keeping them warm, and constantly changing their biological dressings. We see this over and over in the archaeological record. Skeletons with severe, crippling pathologies that healed completely, proving that Paleolithic humans spent immense energy keeping their sick and injured alive. They weren't ruthless brutes who left the weak behind. They were tightly knit communities that viewed medical knowledge as their greatest collective shield against the invisible world. Look at your medicine cabinet. Let's bring this full circle. Look around your modern room again. Think about that tiny bottle of hand sanitizer on your desk, or the running tap water in your kitchen sink. You live in a world where you can slice your finger open on an aluminum can, rinse it out for 5 seconds, put a piece of plastic over it, and never once have to worry that you might lose your arm by Tuesday. The effortless safety you enjoy right now represents about 0.001% of your daily mental energy. You don't have to cultivate antibiotic beer. You don't have to let insects bite your open flesh to stitch it together. And you don't have to rely on a stone blade to save your life from a mounting infection. But never forget, you possess the exact same immune system, the exact same resilient DNA, and the exact same adaptive brain chemistry as those ancient medical pioneers. You are the descendant of people who faced a terrifying, invisible universe of pathogens with nothing but their minds and their hands, and they figured out a way to beat it. We didn't just stumble into modern medicine. We inherited the hard-won knowledge of thousands of generations of engineers, observers, and survivalists. The next time you wash a cut or take a simple pill to clear up an illness, Take just 1 second to remember the Nubian brewers, the ant suture surgeons, and the healers who packed open wounds with bog moss by firelight. Remember what it actually took to survive a scratch, and realize just how extraordinary it is that you don't have to think about it anymore.